Hello, my name is Matthew Lambert, and this will be my presentation for Module 12, my case study for EDL 850 School Law. First of all, let's summarize the case and present the facts that we have here. So again, what is happening? Because of fundraising efforts from the PTA, the staff and community at St. Regis School, they have a new computer lab. That has 20 computers. They used the fundraising to purchase some software for the next 2 years, and that was the key focus of that fundraising. Mrs. Lynn, who she worked with the teachers to obtain the best software for St. Regis, and as well with me, Mr. Sample, the principal. They worked together to prioritize information and decide on the best software. The teachers then, after about 4 months, they asked Mrs. Lynn to make copies of software in order to access it in the classroom. And she first made copies for the 3rd and 4th grade teachers. She gave the copies with a flash drive to Mrs. Brandon, who is a fairly new teacher. This is her first year. She has 3 years prior experience. And to Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Brandon then voiced her concern to Mrs. Lynn regarding the copyright violations. She was somewhat dismissed. Mrs. Lynn showed no concern to Mr. Sample when confronted, and she's pleased by how much money she saved for the district, even though she has copyrighted information and made copies of that and distributed it to the other teachers. When and where did this occur? Let's talk a little bit. This is Mr. Sample, my 4th year of employment. This occurred 4 months after the computer lab schedule has been in place. Again, the town is St. Regis. It's St. Regis School, which they service children grades K through 8. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade levels were initially supplied the flash drives beginning with the 3rd grade, and all of this began from funds from fundraisers. Again, what happened, the information was copied, the software, the other teachers, 3 other teachers didn't really use the computer lab. They requested for copies of the information, teachers as whole, to use in the classroom, so Mrs. Lynn went ahead and did that for them. So let's look at who is involved. Mr. Keith, myself, the principal of St. Regis, Mrs. Lynn, who's a library media specialist, and she also has the new computer lab position, so she has a dual role at this point. Mrs. Brandon, this is her first year teaching at St. Regis as a 3rd grade teacher. She does have 3-year prior experience. Mrs. Williams, a 3rd grade teacher. The 2nd grade and 4th grade teachers are also involved. Students are involved. We wouldn't want to leave out Mrs. Evans, who is the PTA president, and then of course overall the PTA. Going on, let's continue the case, summarizing and present some more facts. In our summary, this is what we have. Mrs. Lynn. She's clearly on the defense, especially when I confronted her, Mr. Samples. She sees no issue with copyright violation due to the size of the school and community. She says, we're a small school, small community. What's the big deal? It's not a big deal. Nobody's going to catch us. She's disgruntled by the conversation this evening brought up because her main focus is trying to save money for the district as a whole. And it seems where we can read through the case study, she is involved with the PTA president, Ms. Evans, as she has helped her in the library copying such materials. Let's talk a little bit about myself. Mr. Sample conducted conversations separately with Mrs. Brandon and Mrs. Lynn. I showed understanding of Mrs. Brandon's concern, tried to convey this sense of importance and the possible legal ramifications to Mrs. Lynn. Mrs. Lynn has been instructed to stop all copies, collect all copies that were made. However, she was complimented too on her resourcefulness. That's an important point. There was still that point where I said, you know what, you're extremely resourceful, so good job. At this point, the only evaluation was policy of copyright. There's been no implementation at this point except the order to destroy all copies and stop making them. Let's look at Mrs. Brandon. She's a new teacher to St. Regis with 3 years prior experience. She is concerned about the copyright legalities with this information, and she initially spoke with Mrs. Lynn before speaking with myself, Mr. Samples. Let's look at the legal issues. First of all, legal and ethical issues, the big one stands out. Copyright laws. Under 1110.1, faculty and students may only perform or display, but not reproduce or distribute any copyrighted work in the course of face-to-face teaching activities in the classroom without seeking permission from the publisher or the author. So that's extremely important. That's the big violation. We must seek permission first. Harassment or discrimination, there hasn't been any harassment or discrimination seen at this point. However, let's look at the potential harm. Fines, they could raise from $750 to $30,000 for such violations. There could be a harm relationship between Mr. Lynn and Mrs. Lynn and Mr. Sample, the relationship between myself and Mrs. Brandon. All of these relationships, there's a harm in destroying those. And the PTA, their relationship, their involvement in school activities and fundraisers, and all in all, the school reputation. No matter what side or what decision is to be made, the school reputation is at balance. The future success for students and teachers, students may not have access at all. If we are caught in violation, they wouldn't have access to this software anymore, and that could be a huge detriment to their learning process. The successes with the computer lab as a whole. It could become such a problem, teachers would say, you know what, let's not do it anymore. Let's not even go to the computer lab. The lack of instructional material for students. And finally, one of the most important, teachers may not feel supported on both sides of the issue. Mrs. Lynn may not feel supported by, he's just making me stop, not saying anything else. And also Mrs. Brandon may not feel supported if we go the other way and ignore. Let's continue on. Let me synthesize this information, and I came up with the following statement. As the principal, it is my job responsibility to ensure that my school is abiding by all the laws and regulations that are set forth. However, Mrs. Lynn has violated copyright laws by copying and distributing electronic files via flash drive to the 3rd and 4th grade teachers. Therefore, Mrs. Brandon has brought it to my attention, and I held a meeting with Mrs. Lynn and asked her to stop distributing and making copies of this material immediately. So that was already done. Let's synthesize the facts that we have here. First of all, the people. We have the principal, myself, Mr. Keith Sample, Mrs. Lynn, Mrs. Brandon. We have other 3rd and 4th grade teachers, students, the PTA organization, and the PTA president, Mrs. Evans. Look at the place. St. Regis is a rural area, 25 miles from a large city, has 2 grocery stores, 1 drugstore, and a few small businesses. St. Regis School, it houses students again, K through 8th. The 9th through 12th grade students that are living in St. Regis are transported to a larger school district. There are 2 special ed teachers and 2 classroom teachers per grade level with a total of 420 students. The program, again, is K through 8. Seems to be a heavily involved PTA. They do a candy and gift wrap sell. They have a spring fling. This all raises money for the school and organizations. And strangers aren't accepted readily. It's one of those towns you move in, you really have to prove yourself first, where Mr. Sample has proved himself. He's supported per the survey. There's been new software purchased for the computer lab program that can house 20 students. The public school, it is state funded. It's stated in there, there's some small funds received from the state. What's missing? We don't know anything about the school board members, or the superintendent is never mentioned. Is there a curriculum committee, a curriculum director, or has there been any student input? These are very important things that are missing that we need to really think about in making the best decision and best outcome for the students. Let's review and prioritize the information. The consideration to stakeholders with what is happening at the school right now. Community members and the support of Mrs. Lynn. What's going to happen with that support? Mr. Sample's reputation, my reputation, which is on the line with every decision made. School fines could be imposed, and the school seems like it's barely getting by, and they rely on these fundraisers, so if those were to happen, these fines could possibly force closure. The school reputation, the students, their lack of access to material, and Mrs. Brandon's relationship in the community and with other school members. Can I learn more? Let's learn more about the school board members. Is there any past evaluations of teachers that we could look back on to see, how do they react with certain things, or what is the reaction when something takes place? The contractual purchase agreement of the new software curriculum, what entails in that? What are the laws of distributing that material? Is there a clause in there, anything to that effect? We don't know that. I would like to know more about the superintendent, more about student input. And then the 3 teachers that would not send their students to the computer lab, why aren't they sending them? That's something that we need to know. And finally, the relationship between Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Lynn. We need to know those types of relationships and what's going on there. Do I know enough to make a decision? I believe enough information is available to make a decision because copyright laws have been violated. The only thing that I maybe would need to know further is would I possibly need to consult the superintendent. Let's identify the possible options, the possible consequences. First of all, option 1, take no action. Let's take no action. Mrs. Lynn will stop producing copies, destroy the copies that were previously produced. This was already told to her, so this is my no action option. The computer lab will be ran as it is in the status quo. Instruct teachers that the same schedule will be in place. 3 teachers will continue to not use the computer lab services, and Ms. Lynn will continue to be the computer instructor as well as the library media specialist. Option 2, the most comprehensive. Let's establish a cross-curriculum approach. Why aren't those teachers sending their students? Why do those other teachers feel that they need that software in their classroom? Let's ask all the teachers to meet together with Mrs. Lynn. Figure out how the classroom needs can be met in the computer lab. Excuse me. Mr. Sample, myself, I'll have a meeting on copyright laws and their importance. Finally, there's been some conflict with the staff, as we've seen, so let's conduct those restorative meetings with the staff and also convey to the PTA how their dollars are being utilized and spent to the best of their abilities. Option 3, let's take Mrs. Lynn's suggestions. Let's allow the material to be copied and distributed. Teachers will be able to utilize material for their computer classroom. The PTA will assist in handing out materials, and Mr. Sample will ignore all copyright laws. So let's see how that option may work out for us as well. So let's evaluate the options. Option 1, taking no action, continuing with the decisions that have been made. There's no further action that will be needed. Mrs. Brandon will realize her importance of bringing up violation. There will be no change to anyone's schedule. That's a huge pro. 3 teachers will continue to not use the computer lab. Let them do what they need to do. Mrs. Lynn will have no change to schedule and continue her duties and nothing to implement or spend further time on. We're done. Some cons to this. The teacher perception. Mrs. Lynn will not feel supported. The PTA president will not be valued. 3 classes will not utilize the computer lab or have any access to the new software material. And the teachers will feel they aren't able to teach what they want to teach. And then let's look at the pros and cons of option 2, which is the most comprehensive. The pros, open and honest communication. The teachers will feel supported by being able to share their curriculum ideas. The classroom needs will be met in the computer lab. Copyright laws will be abided by. Staff will feel that they have a voice. The PTA will feel involved and see their dollars working in action, and the staff, most importantly, will be well versed on copyright laws. The cons of this, Mrs. Lynn will feel dismissed. The teachers will not be able to come together and agree on curriculum changes. Mrs. Brandon will feel a backlash from veteran teachers possibly, and it'll be more work for teachers and staff. Let's do the construction, option 3. The construction of the letting Mrs. Lynn do what she wants to do. Mrs. Lynn will be satisfied that her ideas were accepted. The teachers will be able to use the program in their classroom. Win-win for them, they will see. The cons to this, the school will be subject to heavy fines, possible school closure, laws will be broken, Mr. Sample's position as a principal may be terminated, and finally Mrs. Brandon will feel as if she's not being heard.